Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to The Wandering Village. This is the game that we're having a look at today. It's gone 1.0. I've been playing with the full release build. Now if you're not across it, I do overviews on this channel. I have a look at a game for 2 hours. It's the Steam refund window. I have a little spiel around it, but generally speaking, they're short videos with a brief overlook. In cases like this, there are exceptions. I played this when it was in early access, kind of just chucked it on the shelf, planning to come back at 1.0. Nothing ever really wrong with it, but sometimes, I don't know about you, I have to come up with my own triage on what to play and what not to play, and if an early access game shows promise, I'm happy to shout it out, but generally speaking, my backlog is so deep that I will just wait for something to go 1.0 to really touch base with it. So I remember being impressed with this in the first instance. It seems it's had lots of updates. It's always worth celebrating when something makes it to final release, and the couple of hours that I've just thrown in now in the full build have been really delightful. This is a wonderful little narrative, colony management type game. These are one of my favorite sub-genres that's very quickly becoming a mainstay genre, which is often dominated by things like Frostpunk or Ixion. And, you know, there are close cousins. Things like Terra Invicta comes to mind as well. A bit more in the 4X space, but still very narrative thread as opposed to open sandbox. So this game sits in that space. Now, something significantly different from the three that I just mentioned, for example, is difficulty. Now, those three are eye-gougingly, brutally difficult games by design, and I love that. That's fine, but not everyone's going to be for it. I would absolutely understand if someone said they bounced off Frostpunk because it's kind of too difficult. Or especially the Terra Invicta example, you're going to spend 50 hours and you might not build even a single spaceship in that time because just grappling with the core mechanics is very tough. Now, they have their place, but that doesn't mean that that genre has to be that hard. It just so happens to have emerged that way. Now, it's not to say Wandering Village is easy or simple. I would say there are tricky components, but if I were to put a label on the difficulty, I would call it comfortable. And I would argue there's probably a very nuanced skill set to getting a difficulty to work at that level without being boring and without being overly taxing. So yes, the long and short of it is, if you're interested in colony builders, especially the more emergent narrative ones, but maybe you find that generally speaking, they're a bit too hard. At the end of the day, games shouldn't stress you out more than you're willing to accept, right? It's your fun. Well, I think Wandering Village is exactly what you'd be looking for. And it's just really well crafted. Like, all the art is beautiful. I hate to use the term Ghibli-esque, right? Because that shit's thrown around everywhere. But there is this hand-drawn animation to the little main characters, and they're just sort of like 2D sprites sitting against the world backdrop. And it's just really pretty and well realized thematically. The music's lovely and complements, and the vivid color palette is excellent also. The elephant in the room, or the Wandering Village in the room, I suppose, is that you are on the back of, you know, the gameplay equivalent of a world turtle going through space. Like broad strokes, you share a symbiotic relationship with this Onbu, is the name of this fictitious creature, and there's a bit of mystery around it. Under the narrative, it sort of just appeared and it was something lost to time and potentially fiction. No one's seen one of these in hundreds of years. They're more of an underground creature, but there is a world crisis going on, which is a bit of a doom timer or narrative impetus, that there is poison permeating through the land, and it's causing a lot of upset for these tribal villages of which you are part of. You're the leader of one that finds this Onbu. So this Onbu is getting shook up by the poison clouds as well. So he's getting up and moving around and doing his own thing, and you can jump on his back. And through the course of the game, yes, you have village management, colony management staples, which you'd be used to, you know, research trees, food, housing, that sort of stuff. But you marry it with this wandering village that he just goes wherever he wants. As a super world map, he'll choose left or right pathing decisions motivated by hunger and sleep and that sort of thing. You can try and nudge him in different directions with various bits of tech. Obviously, I've only gone so far into it, but you can try the stick, you can try the carrot, you can try and discipline him, but it sort of does a telltale. Onbu will remember that, or Darren as I named mine. So it's actually quite novel and clever, and there is a secondary layer that you obviously have very limited real estate in the space that you're building on, and you couple that with other more novel limiters like temperature, humidity, which will affect what you build, where you build it, things like growth rate. At the moment, I can grow corn, I can grow cactus, right? But depending on the world state, being that you're not really set in a world geolocation, when you're on the back of this thing that travels kilometers and kilometers, it actually moves you around and you have to adapt to a sort of changing biome. It's very clever. And it's one of those things, I was just so impressed with how put together the package is. I went and checked out the dev, Strayfawn Studios. Like, they tickled my memory. You got to give me a break though, guys. There's a million of these things I got to try and keep in my head. And I checked their back catalogue and I kind of felt a little bit silly because there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. Like many indie developers with the breakouts hits, they've turned into a pseudo publishing house. So they've got a couple of other things under their belt that I wouldn't mind having a look at, like River Towns. I've never seen that before, but that looks cool under a different dev. But things like Airborne, Empire, and Kingdom, that's under their publishing label, which I quite enjoyed, if a bit samey for a sequel. Nimbatus, which is like a drone constructor, the same thing. A great game. I wouldn't necessarily call it brutally hard, but very tricky and well balanced between comfortable mechanics and challenging, almost puzzly scenarios. What else do they cover? Flotsam, I haven't looked at that in years, but I remember enjoying that. Kind of a water world colony builder dealing with sort of pollution aspects. And Niche, genetic survival game, which is very niche. It's like 10 years old. I really like that. It's kind of a eugenics simulator for these ferret things that you play. It's probably not the best pitch, but I still remember it to this day as a game that I barely touched 10 years ago, so it left an impression. Interestingly, they do seem to have like a bit of a nature, environmental bent to their games. This is not an exception. Like I said, you have to live in harmony with the giant that you're on the back of, but there's also a pretty big focus on not over farming the land that you're on and harvesting versus uprooting things. Like one of the first things you do is figure out berry production. You can uproot them whole cloth, but they won't grow back. But that's how you get seeds, and then you in turn can use the seeds to germinate new plants. So trying to relocate the berries becomes a little task of its own. And the game's not heavy-handed with it. I hate environmentalist stuff when that's their objective, right? They want to browbeat you about how you're a bag of shit for polluting the oceans and all this sort of stuff. No, that's not what's going on here. It just happens to be set in a, setting where it gives you a moment to pause by giving actual mechanics that focus on tending the land. And I won't get into the narrative too much, but you kind of build a radio tower and we're starting to communicate. Again, the poison is becoming a bit more of a plot point, but it's also raised the idea of, are we just going to exploit this thing that we live on the back of and treat it poorly, or are we going to try and find some symbiotic balance in between? So the story's touched on that, again, without ever being heavy-handed. So all in all, I think it's a really cool package. I use the term comfortable. I hate cozy. I despise it, but I would use comfortable to explain this. The balance and the difficulty and the entire mechanic and experience all around is clean. It's well-rounded. You're not going to get bored, but you're not going to uninstall it because you feel that it's brutally or unfair. All in all, absolute banger of a game, and I'm glad it made to 1.0. You should pick it up and check it out this weekend. Anyway, team, I just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.